What if you could take that risk, make that change, reach that goal, live your best life? Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast, where we get together with amazing experts and everyday people who share challenges, encourage healing, and explore the possibilities that life has to offer. I'm your host, Gary Scott, and I'm excited that you're along for the ride. Anybody in trouble here? Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast. And today I have an amazing guest who is going to help fix my brain, and which is going to be a Herculean task along with everyone else's brain. Hello, Dr. Rebecca Jackson.
Hi, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to have some fun and we're going to cover some amazing stuff. But first, I'm just going to fire off your bio if that's okay.
Sure.
Cool biz. Everybody, we have Dr. Rebecca Jackson is an industry leader in brain health and optimizing the brain to enhance how you feel and function. She brings 15 years of brain balance experience to her role as Chief Programs Officer. In this role, she has published research in improving cognition, development, and well-being, drives programmatic enhancements, and creates new programs to meet the growing demands of people wanting to achieve more for themselves and their children. Dr. Jackson is the author of the book Back on Track, and is a frequent media guest as an expert in improving brain health, development, and cognition. Dr. Jackson's work has been featured in Mayo Clinic Press, Forbes, Psychic Central, Business Insider, and more. She has appeared in both local and national news and shows such as The Doctor Show and NBC Nightly News. So that's all good stuff. All good stuff. All good stuff.
Fun stuff all along the way.
So welcome again, Doc. You have so much to talk about. I'm fascinated by all this and I can't wait to jump in. But unfortunately, I'm contractually obligated to ask you the what if you could question. So Dr. Rebecca Jackson, do you have a what if you could moment or what if you could thought, or has there ever been a what if I could in your life you'd love to share with us?
What if I could is what led me to the seat I'm sitting in today. Is the more I learned about the brain, understanding that what we see as symptoms or behavior actually stems from how our brain functions. So my what if I could moment was, what if instead of focusing on treating symptoms or medicating to create change, what if we could create change at the root? What if we could change the brain so that there's less of a need to work around symptoms and challenges? So the what if I could is what drives me personally and professionally, because we all have a brain. My path here started as a parent. I had a 1-year-old and I was fascinated with development. And so I wanted to learn as much as I could about development to help my kids as they grew and developed. And then now, as my kids are older and I'm watching my parents get older, now I'm driven by the question of, what if I could help my parents' brain health so that their health span aligns with their lifespan? I want their cognition and lifespan to align for that quality of life. So what if we could change your brain to improve the quality of life?
Wow. I mean, let's face it. You hear the term brain dead, but you never heard the term heart dead, lung dead, arm dead, right? I mean, because you can function with a lot of things, but that you really need your brain to function. And I don't know how much is with today's diets and today's food and today's stuff. I mean, do we see some sort of jump from like years ago to today where our brains are suffering more?
Absolutely. And I'm going to start by saying I do not believe that the foods we eat are causing ADHD, autism. These conditions are more complex than that. However, the foods that we eat on a daily basis can either help to minimize the complications or exacerbate the complications and make things worse. What we eat when we're young provides the building blocks for our brain and body to grow and develop. And then what we eat also provides the fuel for how I can perform each and every day. And we've all experienced it. When our brain runs out of the necessary fuel, we have a harder time regulating our mood and emotions. regulating and sustaining our attention. That term hangry, it's real. Your brain has run out of the resources, and the brain's amazing, where it's always going to protect survival mechanisms. So it shuts down our higher level brain functions so that we can thrive and survive. So we lose our ability, our attention, regulation, decision making when we've run out of resources. And so what we eat, how frequently we eat, and the quality of the foods that we eat have a huge impact on our brain health in the moment for how we're going to perform over the next couple hours, but also over the lifespan. There's a cumulative effect to lifestyle.
To that. I don't want to scroll too much, but I always do anyway. So I'm going to scroll real quick. Were you a, are you or were you a chiropractor before you got into this line of work?
Yeah. So my original profession, when I graduated from school, and then I went to grad school to become a chiropractor, and I was a chiropractor in private practice for 10 years. So I've always gravitated towards integrative health, wellness, that the concept of I want to understand the cause, so that I can create change. And then as my husband's job moved us across the country and we had our first child, I sold my practice and I was going to be a stay-at-home mom, and very quickly realized I needed mental stimulation and engagement. And so I went back to school and really started focusing on understanding the neurology of development. As I mentioned earlier, as a young mom, I wanted to know what was everything I could do to set my kids up for success as they grew and developed.
I think I'm scared to death of chiropractors, but we have a really good one here in the desert who promises not to hurt me when I go in. Don't hurt me, and he's amazing. But I totally get. I mean, the blood flow to the brain. I mean, if you're pinched off, if something's right here, and you're not getting the blood flow right. I mean, the chiropractic really plays into the brain, doesn't it, a little bit?
It does. Nothing in the body can be separated. Everything works together. Even if you just simply look at how our muscles work, the muscles that connect to the back of your head come to your shoulders and down your back, and there's this crisscrossing pattern. So if you have a misalignment, head tilt in your neck, there's a ramification throughout your body that can impact the brain as well. But really, the work that I do now, while there's some foundational overlapping principles of really focusing on root cause, it really is separate from my original profession. But chiropractic gave me a wonderful foundation in anatomy, physiology, and understanding the body and movement. And that was also my introduction to neurology and understanding the power of the brain. And when it comes to neurology and the brain, the more I learn, the more I feel like I know nothing. And there's so much more to learn.
It's limitless. It's limitless. But now that when I was young, which was 120 years ago, if your kid is still eating paste at 5 years old, you're totally cool with it. Yeah, it's like just eating paste. But now, I mean, I have a 3-year-old grandson and I have a 5 or 6 month old grandson. I don't remember. And my other son's wife is pregnant, right? So now all of a sudden, and my wife's grandson, now I guess my grandson through marriage, is autistic, very heavily autistic. So all of a sudden I'm conscious of what they're doing, right? Like before, it's like, it's just a kid. He'll grow out of it or this and stuff. But there is like a weird fear thing right now with our kids, like if they're not doing something in time.
But our environment, as you touched on earlier, has truly changed. There are different chemicals and toxins that we're exposed to on a regular basis that can impact the brain and have a negative impact on inflammation and hormones. So I think our awareness has increased in our understanding, but our environment has changed when we look at the quality of our soil and the foods that we're eating. There have been a lot of changes from a lot of different directions. And then we look at lifestyle. One of the things that I've learned the most about development is two of the most powerful drivers of development is movement, our motor system, and our sensory system. Because when we learn through our senses. It's what we hear and see and feel. That's what provides us experiences for me to learn that's something safe, that's unsafe, that's interesting information. I can apply it over here. And so providing our growing and developing kids with as much movement and as much multisensory stimulation as we can enhances development. But now we're in this interesting time where our kids have technology at their fingertips in some wonderful ways that can provide some great experiences, but it can also really put us out of balance with the amount of time our kids are spending moving and having multisensory experiences versus when we're on technology and we're not engaging and moving our body, which I believe can have a very real impact on development.
Yeah, it freaks me out when, to go out to dinner. Like when my kids, when I was a father, I hate when people say that, but I'm gonna say it anyways.
Yeah.
We didn't really have the phones, they were kind of just coming out. And so when we had dinner every night, mom and dad put their phones away, TVs were off, we sat at the table and we talked. How was your day? What's going on? You getting bullied or whatever, what are you doing? Um, but you go to a restaurant now and you see a family of four sitting at a dinner table. I'm guilty. We've all done it, right? And mom, dad, and the two kids are all on their phones, staring at their phone, and there's like no communication. So the kids aren't getting the stimulus of people, right? Talking to a person.
Yeah. It's not only the stimulus of talking to a person, but it's also, again, it's the movement and the multisensory experience. And I always want to ensure I never want to leave guilt or shame at the foot of any parent or any caregiver or adult, but knowledge is power. And so understanding that if we can find a healthier balance of how we're using and engaging technology, and it's hard because our brain naturally seeks out what's going to give us dopamine. Our brain wants to feel good. We want to be happy and feel good. And so as adults, we orient our lives around what makes us feel good. I I get up in bed, out of bed in the morning to get a cup of coffee. That's my first dopamine of the morning. And I drink my cup of coffee so that I can go for a run because that's my second dopamine hit of the morning. And I run so that I stay sane and stable throughout the day. And then I enjoy a glass of wine at night. So, and these things are all dopamine pieces that can be okay in small doses, but any one of those things, if you do too much of, is suddenly now not good. It's the same thing. Our kids and our adult brains often are seeking out social media and scrolling the funny memes and watching to see how many likes we get or gaming on devices. That also gives our brain a dopamine hit. And so we will begin to orient our lives and our actions around where we're getting that dopamine from. So I think for a parent, it's first starting to understand what are you orienting your life around to get your dopamine? Are you getting it in healthy or unhealthy ways? And how do you find balance there? And when you can understand that in yourself, observe that in your kids. So I've got a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old. My 15-year-old he's a 15-year-old boy that is travel hockey dominates our life. And if he's not playing hockey, he's fishing, surfing, or lacrosse. He is
Yes.
constantly moving, constantly on the go. He gets his dopamine from time with friends, from physical activity, and from accomplishing an achievement in sports. And I know that from watching him. If he doesn't have something going on, he can sleep until 12:30, but he'll get up at 7:30 in the morning to go fish or to go surf or to go, shoot pucks in the driveway. So that's how I know where his dopamine comes from. But if you see your child waking up in the morning and first thing that they're doing is wanting to grab their phone or their tablet, or they're choosing that technology device rather than engaging, and that tells you they're starting to orient their life. They're reinforcing the pathways that's seeking dopamine through the technology. So that to me is a red flag to say, okay, how do we make sure that this is a healthier balance? How do I make sure that my child is going to be able to get the joy and fulfillment that their brain is craving and seeking from other things so that we're getting stimulation in other ways as well?
And it's so bizarre, Doc, and you know this better than me, but I mean, it starts super early. Like if I'm sitting there holding a 1 month old baby. Like when I was holding my grandson at 1 and 2 and 3 months old, because when the kids come over, they live 2 blocks away. The first thing I do is grab the baby, and then I recognize they're here, and I go, "Oh, you guys are here too." But if the phone is around, if I like do something stupid, like I think the baby's sleeping, and I'll just scroll right while the baby's laying on my chest. If the baby will be drawn to that phone. It is bizarre. I mean, we've kind of done tests like to move the phone around, and all of a sudden Benny's like, "Oh, it's over there." It's like it starts right away, doesn't it?
Does do you know one of this is a very vivid memory of mine that happened years ago, and I wrote about it in my book that you mentioned earlier. We were flying over the holidays, and we were standing in an airport security line, and there was a family in front of us, and they had a toddler in a stroller, and the toddler was starting to get fussy antsy. So the mom handed the toddler a board book, and I watched that toddler swipe the board book. This child didn't know how to turn a page. He was trying to swipe like it was, and I was like, my
Crazy.
goodness. And I felt so old in that moment, right? Again, no judgment. But I think for parents to be aware of the pros and cons and risks and benefits, and I think to be aware of, ask yourself, what am I using the technology for? There's a time and a place. Look, kids are melting down. You've got to get dinner on the table. There's a time and a place. But thinking about, am I using this for entertainment, or what's the purpose behind using it? And you can't just go all or none. It's hard to say, okay, that's it. We're turning it all off. But where are places that you can reduce, and what are you replacing it with? So not to turn the whole conversation in technology, but I think it's an important topic that impacts every single one of our brains.
Well, it's a huge topic now because I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, it's almost impossible to escape. And like I said, I mean, literally, I'm watching a 2-month-old baby be drawn to it when the child has zero idea what the heck or why they're being drawn to it. They just are. It's so bizarre. But, and it just kind of brings me back to that fear of development. Like, as we're watching the child, like my grandson Jet, um, at 2.5, he's still kind of talking, like, he's really talking in his mind. He's way too smart, right? He's, like, way too smart at 2.5. Yet he struggles with the words, so he gets frustrated, and that's when it kinda goes off the rails, and I don't know why all of a sudden I have this thing like, "Oh, I'm worried he's not talking yet," when I'm thinking, "I probably didn't talk till I was, like, 7." You know what I mean? So, it's weird for parents now, isn't it? This thing about, are they developing at the right stage and stuff like that.
It is it, but again, to me, I'm going to go back to power is knowledge, and I'll tell a story about my own son, and then we'll continue to talk about Jed. But um, because of my knowledge and awareness, when my second child was born, one of the very first things I did was test reflexes. So I did just a quick neuro exam. And one of the things that I saw is infants should be born with a set of primitive reflexes that are survival mechanisms that
Yeah.
help to start build the brain early on. And so what starts as an automatic reflex activates sensory awareness and motor control. So it starts to build aspects of the brain. And then as the brain matures, the brain turns off the reflex. So you now have control of that move interaction.
Mm.
So for my son, one of the infant reflexes is called the palmar grasp. And so when you touch an infant's hand, they grasp onto your fingers. So that sweet, sweet moment of that tiny little hand grabbing yours, that's a reflex. And testing my son, he didn't have that reflex. And it was not a panic moment. It was just simply information. And when you understand the progression of development and understand the chain of events, I knew from day one that my son was most likely going to be delayed in speech and struggle with some fine motor handwriting pieces. And what was interesting to me was it wasn't tested. Other reflexes were tested, that one wasn't. So I brought attention to it to say, hey, did anybody notice? And the response I got was, oh, mom, just relax and enjoy that beautiful new baby. And that irritated me. I wasn't upset. To me, that empowered me to say, I know what my child needs. I know what to do in order to help. And so I think there's power in parents watching those developmental milestones. I don't think it's often or always cause for freak out moments or massive concern, but there are milestones that should be met along the way. And if there are gaps in development, they can happen throughout. The brain is so complex, everything does not develop at a unified timeline. But if I've got areas that are gapping out, that gives me a roadmap. Where should I focus so that I can support development early on? Because what I think isn't widely understood enough is that our development is the foundation that becomes our higher level brain functions. Our development contributes to our ability down the road to direct and sustain attention, to control and regulate our emotions and impulses, to learn effectively and apply the information appropriately. So, would I be panicking if a child is behind in speech at 2.5? No. But is that a red flag that some aspects of development may be a little bit behind? It is. And so, to me, I don't want to jump to the symptom of practicing this symptom. I want to say what is or isn't happening in foundational development that this aspect of development is lagging behind. And nothing in the brain happens in isolation. So if I have one area of development lagging behind, there's going to be a spider effect. It's going to touch and impact other things, which doesn't mean that all development is going to be behind. But the sooner I can be aware of that, the sooner I can provide appropriate stimulation so that we've got the opportunity to close those gaps at a young age rather than the older we are, the larger those gaps can gap out. And now we've got more work in order to do to close them. And that's exactly what we do at Brain Balance is we are a brain-based program looking to see are there gaps in development that are creating complications, contributing to the symptoms that you're experiencing. And then our program is designed to stimulate and mature and engage the brain so that we're building stronger, faster, more efficient connections in the brain to better support our actions and abilities.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many things I want to go down the rabbit hole with the book, but also the brain balance centers and the brain balance programs that you guys. And so, since you touched on it, you know, man, I mean, ADHD, processing disorders, autism, spectrum disorders, behavioral disorders, learning disorders, just struggling kids. I mean, you guys cover such a large spectrum of a child. I know you do more than children, you do athletes and you do adults and stuff like that. But as far as a child, I know that the autism is such a scary word for parents. And as you see the child maybe not developing, it's like our autistic grandson um, is 10, and he's never spoken a word. And up to 2.5, 3, long before I was at the pitch, but they said he was kind of progressing well, progressing normally, making sounds, saying words, and then it just shut off. So, how do you get, or how are you guys at the Brain Balance Center? How are you reaching these children? I mean, how are you getting to a child like that?
Yeah, there's so much to unpack in what you just said right there, Gary, but I'm going to back it up. And the first thing that I want to say is the way we approach things at Brain Balance is not about the label or diagnosis. In fact, about half of the kids that we work with don't have a label or diagnosis. So maybe the challenge isn't large enough to qualify for a diagnosis, or maybe they haven't gone down that path yet. But everyone that we work with has a gap in development that's creating challenges or complications. There's aspects of life that is harder than what it needs to be. So we're not focused on what the diagnosis or the label is, but on identifying where are there are key indicators of development that we're able to measure to say, okay, great, your balance, your coordination, your timing are on track, but your visual coordinated eye movements are inefficient, slow, inaccurate. So that's going to have a huge impact on your ability to read and process visual information and comprehend. And so through a really comprehensive assessment, we're pinpointing what's on track, what's gapping out so that we can create an action plan to address those pieces. And it the yes, we work with a very broad spectrum, as you mentioned, of concerns, whether it's, somebody struggling with obsessive compulsive disorder or and challenges with attention is the most common thing that we see. But the commonality across all of those conditions is the brain. So whether you're a child that's struggling with a learning disability or learning disorder, or you're somebody that has a hard time regulating behaviors and you're melting down and there's upsets and disruptions happening at home and in the classroom, those things aren't behavior. The behavior results from what is or isn't happening in the brain. So think about your 2.5-year-old grandchild he's communicating in his way and he gets frustrated when that doesn't happen. And then it results in a 2.5-year-old tantrum that can be, flailing and loud and on the floor. That behavior is happening because he's trying to communicate in the brain. He's having a hard time forming the words and making the connections, and you're not understanding what he's saying. So the symptom is the behavior, but at the root of that behavior is that brain performance piece. So the commonality in what we work with and can make a difference in is the brain. We're not focused on changing how you parent. We're not focused on counseling strategies. All of those things are important and also play a role in things, but we're really focused on what can we identify and improve in the brain. How do we mature performance in those areas to then impact the symptoms? And luckily, the way we do what we do, it's very physical, it's very active. And so the kids, for the most part, enjoy program. And it's set up, we work with kids that life can really beat them up from day to day. If you're the child whose name is getting called out in class every day, you know that, your peers know that. And then you come home and did you remember to turn in the assignment and you didn't, and you forgot, we work with a child that oftentimes, no matter how hard they're working, they feel like it wasn't enough, or they're failing, or why can't I do this? And so to me, brain balance is the place where it's their safe, happy place. Everybody wins, everybody progresses. And I love the feedback from the parents and I love the data. I do research, so the data to me tells a story. But the biggest thing to me is when the child can verbalize, when they can tell you the difference in their own words, and their own words come out, just so real and like, I don't annoy people anymore. Or, I'm asked to join the neighborhood soccer game and they never used to. Those moments, it just mean the world. But so that's how we're able to connect with kids. Is luckily the program that we're doing is physical, it's active, it's engaging. There are some tech-based components, so it can feel like a game, but it's a game with purpose to drive improved attention, improved working memory, improved response inhibition. So that's how we're able to work with and impact a broad spectrum.
Well, that's awesome. There's so much about that I love, and it's over 50,000 kids, right? I mean, over 50,000 people.
Yeah.
That is
It's
a massive database of what you're doing. I mean, you can't. I mean, a pharmaceutical company will put out a drug with like testing it on 4 people now, right? But you've done this with over 50,000. That'll show that what you're doing, you're on the right track, right?
It is, and I'm tremendously proud of the research. It's the happy families are wonderful, but that combination of here's what the data shows, and then the parents tell us how that data translates into real life. And through our research, what we see is consistently improvements in sustained attention, in response inhibition. So having better impulse control. We see maturity and improvement in emotional regulation. And that translates into a child's experience in the classroom. And then we did a school pilot study where we also got responses from teachers, and teachers reporting improvement in classroom
Uh,
behavior. So yes.
I would imagine teachers are your biggest fans,
You
right?
know,
Because they spend more time with the kids than the parents do. So, I mean, in a lot of cases, right?
And look at the statistics. If we're talking about ADHD, 10% of US kids today have an ADHD diagnosis, and another 17% are considered subthreshold, meaning there's challenges with, and ADHD is so much more than just attention and impulse control and behavior. It impacts sensory processing, it impacts emotional regulation, it impacts executive function. So when we think about up to a third of our kids in any given classroom are struggling with the very skills and tools needed to be successful learning and performing in a classroom environment, a teacher's job is really hard. And so really what we would say is we don't teach kids, but our job is to build the brain so the brain is more age appropriate. So then anything you're doing, whether it's teaching or counseling or speech therapy, if you are providing those services to a brain that's more mature, it's more successful for everyone.
I love it. And God, you brought up so many different things, and I just don't want to miss them. But I'm going to let you off the hook if you don't want to talk to them about. But one of the things I love that you do is, families are busy, parents are busy, kids come home. Did you do your homework? Did you clean your room? Get off your phone. We got to have dinner. Turn on the TV. I mean, we all know, right? I mean, we've all been, most of us have been parents. So the fact that you are not guilting people You're not trying to reparent people. You're not trying to, it's a big part of making the process healthy for the whole family, right? I mean, I just love that aspect of how you're doing that.
I hope so. Parenting's hard. And we're our life, our world is so busy, and we do it to ourselves, right? I'm the one that signed my son up for travel hockey, and I'm exhausted and I love it. So we're all juggling so much. And then you add budget and trying to feed kid. I mean, life is complex. And then we've got parents that we may be also caring for. There's a lot of complexity. And so at the end of the day, we're all doing the best we can with the tools we have at our disposal. But what I know through my time at Brain Balance is there are so many people out there searching for what else can I do. They've maybe done the traditional route of medication or counseling. They've oftentimes parents have done everything that they know to do, and it's not always enough. Sometimes it is, and if it is, wonderful. What is the right fit for everyone may be different, and that's okay, or the right combinations of tools. But to me, not enough parents know that at the root of your child's behavior, emotional regulation, attention, and learning is the brain. We tend to look at these things as behavior issues. And if we haven't done something to work to mature and change the brain, you have an untapped opportunity that could very well make a difference. And so, for all the parents out there that are wanting to try something before medication or tried medication and it wasn't enough, or it helped for a little while and the child doesn't like how they feel on it, so they don't want to be on it any longer, or need something in addition to, I want more parents to know that there are options. We're learning so much about the brain. And so knowing that there's what if we could change the brain to make life a little bit easier?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to touch on two things because you brought it up a couple times. I'm going to bring up one you haven't. So I've got the M word and I've got the V word. And if you don't want to go to either one of them, it's okay. But medication, I mean, like you said, I mean, so many kids are diagnosed with so many different things, and of course, the very first things they go to is, well, I'm going to put them on 8 different types of meds, right? And then, of course, we have the vaccinations, which are kind of have obviously been so much more in the news the last 4 years with the pandemic and things like that. So, I mean, obviously, there's so much to the brain. I mean, we'll never touch bottom to what's going on with the brain. But what is the deal with vaccinations and medications? I mean, how much do you deal with that at all or not really too much?
Those are questions that parents ask us all the time. And when it comes to medication, that is a conversation, and vaccinations, that is a conversation you have between you and your physician. And as a parent, you make the decision that's right for you. There is a We have families that we wouldn't have been able to work with the child had they not done medication. There is a time and place. And again, no guilt, no shame. Make the decision that is right for your family. But I think all too often, I think parents think and hope that medication might be the total solution. And when we look at ADHD is a very complex condition. It impacts every single region of the brain. So yes, there's an impact on attention and behavior, but there is an impact on balance, coordination, timing, motor planning, executive function, sensory processing. And so a medication might help to subdue some of the symptoms, and we might see increased seated work time, but it's not changing the maturation of the brain. And what we know is that a child with ADHD, we know that aspects of their development is about 30% behind, which is why their attention and focus is going to be less. Their executive functions, it's going to be harder to do. It doesn't mean that they're not brilliant and capable, but if we're having the same expectations of a 10-year-old with ADHD and a 10-year-old without ADHD, the 10-year-old with ADHD in some aspects might be functioning more along the lines of a 7-year-old. And I wouldn't ask a 7-year-old to do fifth grade level homework independently. We're going to support that child different. So I think we need to have a very honest understanding of there's a time and place for medication to mask symptoms, but the medication isn't going to mature the aspects of the brain that are 30% behind. And so what can we do that's going to increase the maturation and integration of those brain functions so that down the road you don't need the medication to pay attention? So um we work with kids on medication, not on medication. that is a decision between you and your physician. It doesn't change our program. It doesn't change our outcomes. But for the parents searching for an alternative or a complement, to know that programs like Brain Balance exist are important. And then when it comes to vaccinations, this is a complicated topic. And I will say, me personally, I do not believe that vaccinations cause autism. I think it is more complex than that. What I know of autism is that there are differences in the gut, there are differences in the brain. They are systems that are on fire, that are not producing energy in the same way, not converting things in the same way. So when I have a system that is more fragile to begin with, and then I introduce a toxin, it is going to be hard on that system. So a vaccination may have toxins or maybe a load to that system, but so could putting new carpet in the house with toxic glue. We're getting toxins and load and challenge in our environment everywhere. So I'm not here to talk about whether or not vaccinations is a touchy topic. I think the conversation is so much bigger and so much more in depth than just that. And to me, I'm less focused on what is the cause and more focused on where do we go from here? Let's understand what are the aspects that we can change or influence so that we can calm the gut and brain so that the child is absorbing nutrients, converting nutrients into energy so that they've got the tools for that brain to grow and develop. And then how do we close some of those gaps in development to impact things? So that's more my personal stance um, on those touchy topics.
Yeah, the M and the V. I mean, gosh, I love all that because, the truth of the matter is you guys could, not you guys, but I mean, in general, if we're just so focused on one thing, like, oh, the vax is the enemy and it's going to kill everybody and it's so bad for the children, stuff like that, it's going to take away from the parents being able to go, well, wait a minute, let me listen to Dr. Jackson and let's focus back on the brain.
Yeah.
That's a piece of it, like you said, if you've already got, especially with autism, like you said, I mean, the gut, I think the gut has so much more to do with autism than people are addressing. I think the gut being so crucial to our mind and our body that we're just not focusing on the child's gut as much as we should. But the other thing that you touched on, um, which I just thought was fascinating about the ADHD, it's like a lot of kids that I know with ADHD are like superhuman kids. I mean, it's not. I don't know why we want to try to. We better slow them down or dumb them down, or we better do this with the medications because that kid's really smart. They're just minds going at a different level, right? I mean, for what you see.
Yeah. Yeah. So exactly what you're saying is here. Let me gather my words and thoughts. Um, some of one of the things that's fascinating to me is ADHD is one of the most studied topic in pediatric health, yet there's still so much to learn and uncover and unpack. So, some of what we know about the attention system in ADHD is the default mode network is more highly activated in an individual with ADHD. And the default mode network is what's activated in our brain when we're daydreaming. So, if you picture, Gary, if you were driving down the road and you're driving through Nebraska, so you're in the car for hours and hours and hours on end, and it's cornfields and cows, and it's a beautiful day. Your mind is wandering. And what happens when we're using our default mode network is our mind is going to scan the future and the past. So a memory randomly is going to pop up from the past, and we're going to worry about something in the future. And so this is some of why with ADHD we can see increased levels of anxiety and stress because your mind is spending more time in that mind wandering state. And so when we see a lot of rumination happening of worrying about things in the future or perseverating on something in the past, that tells me you were using your default mode network. So, but wonderful things happen when we use our default mode network. That's where brainstorming happens. That's where creativity happens. That's where processing life and consolidating memories happen. It's why when I run or walk in the morning, I don't listen to a podcast. That is my time for my brain to wander, and I have my biggest aha moments and my biggest brainstorms at that time. So that's why there are some gifts to the ADHD brain and why there can be some wonderful creativity. Now here's what's cool is when we mature aspects of the brain that are immature, we're not shutting off the default mode network. We're just giving you more control over when you use that. So the ADHD brain is sitting in math class, and when they should be in sustained focus, but they're in default mode network, you're not creating new memories when you're in default mode network. Your mind is wandering, you're not learning something new. So by maturing the brain, I'm giving you more control to say, wait, I need to be paying attention to this. So I'm giving you a better ability to choose what type of attention you're using when you're using it. So as an adult, when I'm working and I feel my brain start to wander, I know it's time to get up and move, have a snack, because I'm not productive when I'm in default mode network zone. So I need to shift back. But that's because there's a level of maturity and awareness that tells me what to do. And so by maturing the areas of immaturity in an ADHD brain, you're not losing the gifts and skills and talents, but you can mature other things that might make things more difficult. So the ability to complete the homework assignment and remember to turn it in. Or one of the things that we see with ADHD is a greater struggle with task switching or cognitive flexibility. So you start one thing, a thought pops into your head. So you jump over here to do that. You should switch back to finish that first task. But we see with the ADHD brain that there's a harder time to task switch. So less of a likelihood to come back and finish what was started. And that could be problematic at school and work, at home, relationships. And so by maturing the brain, and parents worry about that. We want to accept and love our kids just as they are, but if we've got some things holding you back, if we can mature that and make some of those challenges less, then we've got more energy to put into the things that we want to put into.
So, yeah, you've said that statement a couple times, so I'm gonna ask you to explain it for someone like me whose brain is at a 3rd grade level. Maturing the brain. What do you mean when you say you guys worked maturing the brain? What does that mean?
What development is the refinement of networks and connections in the brain. So we're born as infants with very simple development. An infant can lift up their head. They're not even ready to smile or roll yet. Development starts very simple, and over time, it builds in complexity. So it starts with an infant beginning to develop core muscles. So they start to be able to raise that head, and they've got a little bit more head control. And then they start to get control of their sides. And so we've got a young infant that, waving is exciting, but in the beginning, it's not waving, it's both hands working together because they don't have the complexity yet to isolate and segment, to move one body part without a whole system moving together. So when I talk about maturing the brain, it is building connections in the brain that are more refined to support more complex actions and abilities and to give you better control of those actions and abilities. So if we think about a child learning to read, this is a great example of the early reader is sounding out every single letter, and then you see the word often enough and it becomes a sight word. And the early reader, as they read, reads out loud. But then the brain over time, as it matures, wants to conserve as much energy as it can. So now our reading, as we mature and it becomes more advanced, we read silently in our head. It requires less energy. I'm not moving my mouth, I'm not vocalizing. So I can read faster and longer when I'm conserving energy. So our brain always wants to conserve energy, but it takes coordination and control in order to do that. So when I talk about maturing the brain, it is building more complex function, being able to do that function for longer and having better control. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. And is that at the brain balance centers, when you talk about the brain balance program, is that what some of the programs are based on that child's needs? Is if that's one of the things that they need to have help with?
We don't teach reading, but we work to mature the foundational pieces that contribute to
Yeah,
that.
that's, yeah.
So and that's complex, right? When we read, our eyes have to be tracking smoothly and working together. So they've got to scan across a line of text and then jump down to the line below it. If you're not controlling your eye movements, you're skipping words and lines. And as parents, it's hard to realize that that's where struggle's coming from. We say, come on, try harder, pay attention. And this might be an individual that can't control how their eyes are moving. And so they are trying, but they've got lack of control and coordination of those eyes. And our visual system ties to our balance system, our vestibular system. And so if we're not sensing and feeling movement appropriately, it impacts the visual system. So it all development is intertwined and it's all building and scaffolding to these higher level functions. And again, as parents and teachers and caregivers, we see the end result or the behavior. We see the child that can or can't read with ease, or the child that can handle a frustration and work through it or melts down. But all of that is scaffold on top of that development. And so we're always going back to that earliest point of development to say what gaps and holes can we fill in so that this is a more mature brain now facing those challenges and frustrations.
So I love that. And I just especially love the approach to the ADHD. I am not anywhere near, I have no ability for anything about anything, but there's always something that's bothered me about how children with ADHD, if, prescribed or whatever, diagnosed, are treated as if it's just a bad thing. And I love how you guys at the center don't look at you look at the overall child as far as well, yeah, okay, maybe there's some ADHD there, diagnosis there. However, let's look at all the different things that encompasses that and where we can lead that. And I just think that's a wonderful way to it's a gentler and I think more effective way to help the child work through that.
And the parent as well. Parents, we carry such guilt and shame of, am I doing the right thing? Am I
Yeah.
enough for my child? Where am I messing up? What have
Yeah.
I done that's going to put them in therapy 20 years from now, right? And when you've got a child that, has a harder time getting along with peers, is constantly forgetting things, you're getting phone calls from the school. I mean, that's hard. And it's so easy, again, to view this as behavior or to think, am I not disciplining correct? Am I not motivating correct? What am I doing wrong? So there is value in having a label to give you a understanding of there's a set of there's a sense of understanding of this isn't your fault. This isn't my fault. This is the reality. So there are times where I do think a label can be helpful with that, but it's that path forward. And again, this for kids to understand, it doesn't mean that you're not brilliant. It's too easy to look at this as bad behavior, as lazy, as a choice. ADHD is so complex and it impacts so many different things. And I think it's a disservice to the ADHD individual when we're just talking about the attention and behavior. And that's one of my pet peeves when we look at the traditional first line of defense in supporting ADHD. It is behavior modification, support, and it's medication. And are those things needed? Possibly. Again, that's a personal decision, but the parenting strategy doesn't change the difference in sensory processing. The parenting strategy for motivation or discipline doesn't change the developmental coordination that's complicating these things. And so to take the blame and shame off, put an action place and plan, and then we see in our research that it makes a difference.
I love that. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. So let me switch real quick to the electrical part of the brain, but also cholesterol, glucose, because like you said, the brain works, the brain takes energy, the brain uses up so much. Um, cholesterol is a big part of the brain, right? Glucose, cholesterol, the electrical systems in the brain and stuff like that. Where do you touch on
So
that
much
stuff?
complex. Yes. So glucose is it provides energy to the brain. So our body takes the foods that we eat and breaks it down into sugars and fuel. I think it's important to understand when we're talking about glucose and sugars that we burn through sugars really fast, and we want to make sure that we're providing the brain with fuel that's stable and burn slow and consistent. So our healthy fats, our protein, carbohydrates have gotten a bad rap recently, but they are really important to the brain. But we want to make sure that we're minimizing the added sugars. It's not setting us up for success in having the ability to sustain attention and to sustain emotional regulation. And then when we think about the brain also needs fats, and cholesterol
Uh,
is a transport mechanism. When there's tissue damage, cholesterol helps to bring the tissue repair mechanisms to that site to help repair function or repair the tissues. So, but it's again, it's all things in moderation. So
yeah.
we need cholesterol, but we can't have too much cholesterol. We need sugars, but we can't have too many sugars. So
And Ben, there's interesting stuff coming out right now about about Alzheimer's and statins because we're taking away the cholesterol, whether it's good, bad, whether you even need to be. They just put you on a statin if you run out of gas, right? I mean, it's like, so I think we're hurting the cholesterol in our brain, which they're kind of linking. They're looking at that relationship between Alzheimer's and the statins because of what they're doing with the cholesterol.
Well, and I also think we're starting to shift away from such heavy use of statins, where I do think medicine is there's been some phenomenal advances in cancer treatment, in heart health. And then I think there's areas where we're lagging behind. I think psychiatry, there's areas where I think medicine has had better advancements than others. But the bottom line is you cannot separate brain health and heart health. The two are related. And so when we have high blood pressure, that has a negative impact on cognition. And so heart health and brain health go hand in hand and need to be looked at that way across the lifespan.
Yeah. And gut health too, right? Like we kind of talked about before a little bit. Like your gut's our second brain, right? Or I mean, that's got a big part of it too.
Huge. And when I think about autism, I always my head goes to what comes first, the chicken or the egg. Is it the gut creating problems in the brain? Is it the brain creating problems in the gut? I think it's both working together. And it again, this is a complex condition that deserves complex support, which requires a multimodal, multifaceted team approach.
Yeah. The brain's so darn fascinating. I wish I had one. And you've been so gracious with your time, but I can't let you go without touching on the book here because went down the rabbit hole of the book, and I just love when you just look at the parts here: attention, mood, emotions, behaviors, organization, communication, social interactions, learning, and confidence. It all has one thing in common, and that's the brain. And I just like I said, I think we're so paranoid. I mean, even as a grandfather now, even though I let the kid go on the roof, we're so concerned about development of our kids now, right? I mean, when years back we could care less. It's like, yeah, as long as you can milk a cow a day, we'll be fine. But and I love what you're doing with the book because I think, like it says, it just gives that roadmap. It gives that peace of mind to parents to get your book, uh, go through it and understand, okay, I can take a deep breath. I don't have to freak out. Dr. Jackson says this part's okay. So how did the book come about? Which put this book together?
It came about during the pandemic where life changed, and all of a sudden, the number of phone calls, we were flooded with concerns and questions at Brain Balance. I was flooded with friends calling from all over the country, and life changed. Kids were moving less. There was less social interaction, less sensory stimulation, and quickly in research and data, we are seeing an impact on development in kids. And I just and there were a lot of media requests coming in during that time. So I was doing a lot of interviews with different news stations talking about the impact of homeschooling kids and what is this going to mean for development, and everything was so negative, and rightfully so.
Uh,
But there was no here's what we do about it. And I kept waiting for the action plan and it wasn't coming. And so I got frustrated and thought, okay, I do not have all the answers. but I've got a lot of experience and I'm giving the same information out over and over and over again. So why don't I write it down and hand it out? And the information in the book will never be a replacement for a comprehensive assessment and program. But my hope was with the book to provide parents with a tool to say, is this on track? Should I worry? Is this behind? If it is, what can I do about it? And how do I know when's the right time to take more action? And so the book was designed, each of those chapters gives information for infants and toddlers, elementary school age and middle school and high school age kids to check the milestones in socialization, in anger and upset, in learning. There are developmental milestones in categories more than just speech and movement and beyond 2 years of age to help us provide a gauge to say, is my child on track? And what can I be doing at home on a daily basis to help support and optimize their well-being and development?
Well, I mean, I like how you mentioned that. It says, there's you got the parents and the educators take a passive role in the process, but you want them to take a little bit more aggressive role instead of just wishing and hoping and that the growth and change and stuff like that. But you also just talk about how the brain just keeps changing, which I think a lot of us just believe we're born with the brain. We could get smarter, we could learn more, we could read books, we could learn 20 different languages, but we don't really think our brain changes and grows. And I wanted to touch on that real quick, but also, so the book brings out the ages where things you say should be happening. Because that was the other thing I was going to ask you is like, at what age do you see something missing in a child? We go, I should take them in to be looked at. I know that's a bunch of questions, but whatever.
Yeah. At every age, there are appropriate milestones at every age. And so we want to, whether we're talking about an 18-year-old or a 2-month-old, there are or not just motor milestones, but there are milestones to be watching and tracking. And again, not in a high stress, we don't need a massive spreadsheet way, but these are things that I'm just checking in on and keeping an eye on to ensure that things are tracking forward together. And absolutely, the brain can change at every age. And this has
Mm,
been one of the gifts of science over the last couple decades is we used to think of IQ as this very carved in stone thing that you couldn't change. We now know that cognition is absolutely fluid. My cognition from day to day changes based on my sleep, my stress, what I've eaten, have I exercised, and then our development. And development impacts us at every age. Development is not just for kids. Your skills and abilities today, Gary, is based on your development as a child and what you're continuing to do today. So we can continue to enhance development skills and performance at every age. And this is, I think, kind of the next phase for what I'm excited to dig into is how do we continue to drive development and skills as adults and as we age? So
yeah,
parents often have a feeling of, oh, they're in high school, oh, they're in college, it's too late. I wish I knew about this then. It's never too late to change the brain. It might
yeah.
get harder. Adult brains have a little more, I think of it like a layer of an onion. We've got more layers to peel. Yeah, there's, more extenuating
Uh,
circumstances.
old dogs are what is it? Oh, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. Is that what kind of where you're going with that?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
hard, but you can do it. So change
yeah,
is possible at every age.
yeah. So that's what I was going to ask you: is where are we going next? Meaning you, not we, not me, but you guys. Where do you see this at the center? I mean, where we'll just never touch bottom. I mean, we'll go to we'll explore every planet in the solar system before we get to the bottom of the brain. Um, but with your work, where do you see you guys going with maybe AI? I mean, is that helping you or hurting you? Where are you guys going next with your work?
Both and, when we start relying on AI for everything we do, we're not using our brain in the same way. And so AI can make us dumber if we're not careful. And
Yeah,
so we still need to be using our brain. But AI can also benefit us in ways so that we can continue to create more personalized programs and services to better pinpoint what are the roadblocks that are making things more challenging for you. So I think there's such potential to continue to personalize what we do. And the more we learn about the brain and the more we learn about how we can assess and stimulate and mature and track, then we just get to continue to do better with the work we're doing to just continue to drive better and better outcomes.
That's awesome. Well, you're amazing, Doc. I loved every second of this. I want to be careful with your time, and gracious with your time and stuff. So, I lied earlier because I'm a liar. I'm a liar. I said I just had the one question, but I have two questions. So my second question is, before we skedaddle, is there something that you have, a thought, a saying, a belief, could be anything, that you would like to leave us with that means a lot to Rebecca Jackson? Something that just kind of, yeah, this is a belief I have I'd like to leave with you guys if you have one.
I'm going to say two. One is it's not even a belief, but it's just something that I say to my kids all the time. But I think it's important for us all to understand. So it's nothing profound, but it can help us in our daily life. And that's understanding that a tired brain is a negative brain. So if you wake up in the morning or midday and you find yourself negative in your thoughts and your actions, if you see it in your kids, that's waving a red flag to say your brain needs something different right now. You are negative for a reason. And so telling you think happy thoughts, that's hard to do if your brain doesn't have what it needs to be happy. And so a tired brain is a negative brain. So recognize when you're negative because that's your brain telling me I need something different. I need sleep, I need exercise, I need food. And those are three quick ways to pivot that moment. So if you or your child are in a negative mood or moment,
Hmm.
taking a few minutes to spike the heart rate and engage the muscles can change mood and energy. If you don't have time to take a nap because you're tired, but you can exercise, that can help to reinvigorate and reengage um, and fuel. So being aware of that gives you power to influence yourself in that moment. So it's not profound in the grand scheme of life, but I think it's something that I want to instill in my kids to be able to give them a sense of control in their own life of what can I do right now in the moment to feel and function better. And I know I said two things and now I don't remember what the other thing was. So we'll just
I was just going to say, well, then what's the second one?
I don't know. We're just gonna stick with the tired brain was a negative brain, which tells you my brain's at the end of the day and I need to eat and move.
See, I love that question because it even brings up more than this first question. Because now I have to ask you another question. I'm sorry. Um, So this has always fascinated me about the brain, right? It's just it's two different things, right? Because I'm a horrible sleeper. I know the death of me. I'm a very healthy person with diet and exercise and things like that. But I know the death of me is going to be I just don't sleep. That's probably a negative thing, but whatever. So how important, just like what you said about sleep in the brain, how important is sleep on the brain? And the reason that this question bugs me is that isn't the brain always running anyways? Your subconscious is always going. So why is sleep important on the brain?
Sleep is so important, and I'm sorry that you struggle. That is sleep is it's a necessary resource, and when it's a struggle, it is such a challenge, and it has such an impact on life. Um, so yes, our brain is constantly functioning. However, your core muscles and muscle engagement is what allows your brain to rest, to sleep. So there's this fascinating system in your brain. I talk about it in my book. It's called the reticular activating system. I think of it like a garage door. And so when we lay down at night, and I'm not engaging my core muscles, that signals my brain to close the garage door and that shuts off my interaction with the world and the environment. So all of the environment things are still there. The weight of your blankets, the temperature in the room, the dark in the room, the dog barking outside, that's all still there. But when we stop engaging our muscles, it allows our brain to start idling at a slower speed so that we can close our eyes and rest and then sleep. And while we sleep is when a lot of repair happens throughout the brain and body. Sleep is when we consolidate memories. So, one of the worst things you can do as a college student is to pull an all nighter when you're trying to study and prep for a test. But so many powerful things happen during that time with sleep that rests and regenerates and cleans things up and heals and repairs. And then the first thing that we do when we wake up in the morning is the alarm goes off and we stretch. And when we start to stretch, that fires a muscle that fires input into the brain that starts to wake up our brain, and it signals our brain, okay, it's time to open that garage door. We're going to start taking in information. So our muscles sets the idle speed for our brain. So when you are sluggish at work and you're not paying attention and you're not focused, that's why muscle engagement and exercise is important, because that's going to make your brain, it's going to help your brain be more alert and more engaged. And it's why doing relaxation techniques and laying down to sleep at night helps us fall asleep. Does that help to answer that question?
Yeah, and I know that, and I took care of your activated system. I know that, but it just irritates me because I just can't get over the two. Now, my wife literally lays down, crosses her arms, and she's dead for 9 hours. You can't move her, you
Yeah.
can't budge her, you can't light her on fire. It just doesn't. I honestly think she just dies. I don't even think it's sleep. I think so. She'll live to be 150. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I just can't do it. But yeah. I get that, and I've just read a bunch about sleep and trying to get there so that I can live longer, right? And I know that good sleep will prolong you. So, last question, I let you go. I promise. As is, which I just this is such a fascinating subject for me, is hydration. Dehydration is really bad for the brain, right?
It is. And studies are showing even a dip of just 2% in hydration can impact cognition. There is water in every single cell in our body. And so when our cells don't have the hydration it needs, our neurons don't fire and function the way they're supposed to. So sleep and hydration, I'd say they're simple strategies. They're more simple for some than others, but they're critical strategies. I mean, you never see me without a giant water bottle with me, and it's time stamped. So
I was going to say that one has the chart on it. I love that one.
yeah, I'm regimented.
Yeah.
But yes, tremendously important. And it's, to me, hydration is one of the simplest things that we can do. That's a positive thing that you can implement today at no cost, to start really supporting brain health.
Yeah. Yep. I'm a hydration guy. So I just have to say, honestly, Doc, you've been amazing. I just it's so fascinated by the brain. I just know that we'll never hit bottom on this. I mean, the most amazing AI or supercomputers and all that still will never compare with the brain. It's just the most, and we own one. Some of us actually have one, and we just don't take care of it, and we don't think about it, and we don't engage it, and so many of us just take it for granted how incredible this tool is, right? I mean, the brain, I mean, this is what you do, right? Aren't we gifted with like one of the most amazing things ever?
Unbelievable. And you're right, we don't think about it until something goes wrong. And I hope to be a part of changing that. If we can be aware of living our lives in the way that optimizes brain health and performance, it can have an impact on well-being and life.
I love that. So where can we find so we can all get help? Because again, guys, we talked mostly about children, uh, but the Brain Balance Center worked with adults, worked with athletes, worked with children, works with the whole spectrum of things that are involved with that, and so many different programs. So, Dr. Rebecca Jackson, where can we find you? Where can we get more of you? Where can we help? You can help us fix our brain.
Sure. Brainbalance.com, you can find out more information about
Wait, what
programs.
was that again? What?
Brainbalance.com.
Brainbalance.com. Okay.
Yep. And we've got locations all across the US. We've got programs that you can do in center. We also have programs that you can do from home that is still live coached by a brain balance professional coach. So we work with kids, teens, and adults all over the country and internationally. So geographic location does not need to be a barrier. But starting with an assessment is such a powerful way to start. Knowledge is information, and it gives you insight and guidance. So I always love starting with an assessment. You can find out more information, as I said, at brainbalance.com. My book, Back on Track, a practical guide to help kids of all ages thrive, is available on amazon.com or anywhere you buy books.
And it's an Audible. It's an Audible too. You can get
It's
it
an
in
Audible.
Audible if you want it. Yeah.
Yep.
Who read the book? Did you read it or who?
I did read it. So you get 11 hours of me. My husband was like, really? He gets
I
all the
love
TV, but
I love that. So many people, because I got a thing for authors. I try to interview as many authors as I can. And I always ask them who read it. And when they tell me they didn't, I'm like, why not? They go, well, I don't like my voice. I'm like, who cares? I like your voice. So I'm
Yeah,
glad
who
that you
does
read
like
it.
their own voice? But it was a fun experience.
That's awesome. So we
I
could,
enjoyed the whole process of writing the book.
oh, I think I just books fascinate anyone who could write a book fascinate. So we want to go to brainbalance.com.
Yep.
We got the Brain Balance Center. Now, just real quick, is this a franchise thing? People can actually get with you and get certified to open one of these centers?
Yes, it is a national franchise organization. We've got certification training processes so that we've got a formula that works. We've got research to support our protocols and outcomes, and so we train and our system is made up of everything from my original background was a chiropractor. We have a pediatrician. We've got occupational therapists. We have parents whose child did the program and it impacted their life that wanted to bring the program to their community. So we are a collaborative community of passionate center owners that want to make a difference in our community and in people's lives. And we've got a program and protocol and research outcomes to support it.
I love that so much because the future is the mind. I mean, we're basically don't leave our house. We don't get out of a chair. We don't do anything. I mean, it's our brains is the only thing we have left really for people. And we're just, in my humble opinion, I just think we're wasting it. We're destroying it with so much social media and all these other things. And that's why I think what you're doing is so fascinating, getting people to get focused back on their mind, get healthy, get active, work on these things. Again, no judgment if you're in a bad spot. You guys can help get people there. And I think it's besides our heart, it's the greatest gift that we have. It's too bad we're amazing. So everybody, we just we're blessed with some time of Dr. Rebecca Jackson. She's with the Brain Balance Centers and the Brain Balance Programs. Her book is Back on Track. You could find it on Amazon. You could read it or just listen to the amazing Rebecca read it herself, which is great. But this has really been fascinating. I just love this. And I'm just so grateful that you joined us and gave us your expertise. And we can't wait to get more of Dr. Rebecca Jackson.
Well, you were asking questions on my favorite topic, so it made it fun and easy. Thank you.
Well, you're great. Everybody, again, Dr. Rebecca Jackson, please look her up. Please get the book Back on Track, and let's all fix our brains because a lot of people need them. So many people aren't using them right now anymore. So thank you, guys. Thank you, Dr. Rebecca Jackson. Appreciate you being here so much. Thanks again for joining us on another episode of What If You Could podcast. Please subscribe, like, share, and give us any feedback. We'd love to hear it. And remember, if you can dream it, you can do it. See you next time.